What's up, DAW Nation? My name's Wyatt Troy, and I want to welcome you to episode 7.5 of Behind the DAW. Now, what the heck is a 0.5 episode? Well, Behind the DAW is where we usually interview music producers, artists, music industry experts on an emotional, philosophical, artistic, and music business basis. But with the 0.5 episodes, we take the audio from our YouTube series In the DAW, where we invite artists to dissect their songs in real time. We put it into podcast form so you can listen to it on the go and get that perfect combination of emotional and technical knowledge. Don't worry, if you want to watch it, go for it. You can go to YouTube and watch it. But if you want to listen to it, this is the place. Before we get into the interview this week and I introduce who our special guest is, I want to really quick tell you about 4 links that are in the description right now. First link is about the Patreon. The Patreon is what fuels and funds this podcast. It allows us to keep going and to keep doing these interviews so that we can give it to you for free. It starts at $1 a month. It literally means the world if you could do that to help us keep going with this. Plus, with $1 a month, you get access to a patron-only community. It literally means the world if you would check it out. Go ahead and check it out. Link in the description. Second link down there is for suggestions. If you want to suggest someone to come on the show for In the DAW or Behind the DAW, go ahead and click that link. It'll take you to the DAW bot. The next link in there is for private lessons. If you're interested in music production lessons or social media marketing private lessons, go ahead and click on that link. And finally, this is a special link that is only unique to this episode. There is a link to the stems of the song that is playing in the description right now and the song that we're going to be breaking down in the DAW today. So with that being said, I'm just going to do a quick introduction for the artist that we are interviewing today. His name is Thrillogy. This guy is extremely underrated. He's incredible. As you listen to this episode, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. Today, we're going to be talking about the differences in Ableton and FL Studio because he is a native FL Studio user. We're also going to be talking about unique tips and tricks with starting a song. We all know how hard it is to start a song sometimes, so don't worry, we're going to be talking about that. We're also going to be talking about tips and tricks for songwriting. He's actually an incredible songwriter, so don't worry, we're going to get into that. And then finally, we're going to be talking about that gentle balance between variation and repetition. How do you know when a song is too variant? And how do you know when a song is just too repetitious? Don't worry about that. We're going to talk about it here soon. If you like this episode, please like, comment, subscribe, repost, follow, whatever is appropriate on the platform that you are listening on. Maybe it's iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud, Deezer, Google Play, YouTube, whatever it is, please do the appropriate action on there. Hey, thank you so much for listening to this episode of Behind the DAW with Thrillogy. And without further ado, I want to introduce you to Thrillogy.
This song, actually, I didn't start off with like a beat or a melody or anything. I literally came in and sang the vocal chop, like the hook basically, and then wrote the entire song based around that. So it was kind of an interesting way to do it. I don't normally do it that way, but just kind of worked out for this song.
That's really interesting. So the very first thing that you did for this is you went and sung, and it's kind of like on the bar right before the drop, right? That's yeah. Can we check that out really quick?
Yeah. So it's this one right here. So I have them both layered. I have a high part and a low part just to kind of give it that little bit more of an edge.
So with that's the only vocal that you have in this entire track, right?
Correct, yeah.
And so you wrote that one line, and it's cool because it's like you have this massive track, but you only have this one line.
It was all based around that one hook. That's amazing.
And when you had that little bit of vocal in mind, did you kind of have a rough idea about where it might go afterwards? Because certainly whenever I kind of start in that way, I always have a rough idea about what may come after, even if I don't know the details.
So this one, yeah, I knew I wanted to be dark. I didn't have any direction though. I started with that vocal hook, and then the next part that I did there was this piano. It was just a very just kind of dark. And then the rest of the song is kind of based around that.
And so did you copy that MIDI over to like your main synths and everything like that, or did you write a part for each?
I wrote a part for each one, because like if you listen here, I have kind of like a grungy bass sound that doesn't really follow that, but it kind of a new pattern, like a new beat pattern comes in right here. Whereas this one's more like fourths. It's a lot more even.
That makes sense. And I'm assuming that little vocal that's going, that's your vocal, right?
Yeah, I pitched it up and chopped it a little bit, and then just put it in there. I really like the way it sounds. So
that's awesome. Something multiplier. Sorry, I got a question for him. So something that I wanted to ask you about with this is I find it interesting to hear people's different ways of finding a chord progression. You know, some people will take the chord progression of their favorite song, and because you can't copyright a chord progression, that's legal, that's fine, you can do that. Then they bring it in, maybe they change it, maybe they don't. Some people just sit at the piano, play it, and go crazy. You know what I mean? So like, what's your preferred method of coming up with the chord progression?
I always come up with it just from piano, just because, I have a pretty good understanding of like chords and chord progressions and the way they work. I've been playing piano since I was 4. So generally, with this one, I just sat on the piano and just kind of played what I felt, kind of like just whatever kind of comes to mind is what ends up happening.
So really quick, I see something right there that says AU5 bass. What is that? I gotta know.
So that is, this is Harmer, which...
He told me about this. This is cool. Keep going.
Yeah. So I don't think he really uses Harmer that much, but I kind of tried to recreate. I love the sound of his bass in all of his like melodic dubstep songs. He has a very like sharp sounding bass. So I tried to recreate that. This is as close as I could get it, but...
Which is awesome. Yeah.
So basically with that, one thing that AU5 does when he... Is it AU5 or AU5?
You can literally say it anyway. Some people say AUS, some people say AU5, some people say AU5. So I've asked him, like, whatever, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, so this one, it's funny because what he used for his like wobbles and stuff is a little bit unorthodox. He uses like an EQ a lot of the time to give his bass a wobble. So let me see if I can demonstrate it.
As opposed to like volume automation.
Yeah. So like this one, why is that not coming through? There we go. So he'll use the just like a peak right here. I'll kind of like, that's what he'll do a lot of the time for his wobbles, which is really cool.
You know the science behind this multiplier, and I don't fully understand it. So when it becomes like that, it becomes a formant filter at that point, right?
Basically, yes.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Awesome. And so is that literally automating like a normal parametric EQ like we see here? Or is that using a special like filter designed for automation? Or?
Yeah, it's just the normal EQ. There's no like, it's not technically a filter. You just kind of, boost one of the peaks and then move it around from there. You can automate that.
Do you use Harmer quite a bit?
Harmer, so it was one of those plugins that when I first got FL Studio, it was like one of the ones that had come with it. So I did use it a lot. I got pretty good at knowing my way around it. And it's actually a really awesome plugin. I would say it's a little underrated. It's a good wavetable synth. Probably not as good as Serum, but you can do a lot with it.
Yeah, he was, AU5 was telling me about it when we were talking. So he was saying that like, it's actually like one of his favorite synths that he feels super bad because now he's on Mac and he's using Ableton and everything. And so I guess you can't get it for Ableton basically. I mean,
just because it's specifically an image line synth. So it's FL Studio based.
That kind of sucks. If there's anyone out there who knows how to get it for a Mac and so that we can pull it up into Ableton. Well, I guess you could pull it up into Ableton on Windows too. But if anyone can figure that out, post it in the description.
How did you approach the arrangement for the second drop? Did you have additional layers or change things up a bit or?
So the second drop, I put in a little bit different cuts than I had on the first one. So basically like, whereas this section over here, little cups are a little bit. Have like a little drum fill there, and then here on the second one, I had like.
Clipping, and that's okay.
It's a little bit of clipping.
That's okay. We realize it's just because you turned it up for Zoom. It's not you're not an amateur artist.
Yeah, so just I like to switch up the cuts a lot in my different courses, and it really depends on the song too, because a lot of them I will add additional layers or change up the melody. But this one, I feel like this song was a lot more straightforward. It was very, it just made sense the way that I wrote it. I didn't really like try and be complex like I normally do. Like normally I like to throw in like complex little arps and fills and runs and stuff like this. But this one, I feel like because it was such an emotional song, it was just very, very straightforward. It just kind of, I don't know, it just kind of came to me, as cheesy as that sounds.
Awesome. And the arpeggios, did you build them from the chords, or did you just use your instinct in terms of what felt right?
Yeah, so I generally build the arpeggios from the chords, just kind of try and follow that template. So like this. So I don't copy and paste the chords over and go from there. Generally, I'll try and follow the notes within that scale and kind of mess around with it a little bit.
That's awesome. So yeah, because quite a few people, for those of you who don't understand what's going on right now, so quite a few people, what they do is, so they write a chord progression. Let's say it's 1 minor, 5 minor, 4 minor, 3 major, right? Let's just say it's just something like that. And what they'll do is they'll take that and they'll copy it over to, let's say, their lead synth, and then they'll go through and maybe cut out the chords, but more so just keep one note from each chord. So basically the melody is following the chords at that point. But it's, from what you're telling me, John, or from what you're telling us, John, is that you don't do that. You have your chords and then you go to the next instrument and you write whatever feels good. It doesn't even have to necessarily be in the chord at that point, right?
Correct. Yeah.
That's awesome. Because to me, that's more interesting. You know what I mean? You're more so at that point. You're not confined to just the notes that are in the chord. You know?
Yeah. Generally, I try to avoid like copying and pasting. I feel like it ends up sometimes, for me anyway, when I try and write that way, it ends up being a little bit linear. So I generally try and if I open a new instrument or if I open a new synth, I generally try and start from scratch.
That's awesome. You actually bring up a really good point that Multiplier taught me a while ago, and I'd love for you to expand on it. Multiplier was basically saying, like in the course of, let's say, the first verse, right, just to like create a 4-bar loop and then duplicate it over and over and over isn't a good thing. You need to have something, you need to have consistency between, like, let's say your verse is 16 bars. You need to have consistency between those 16 bars, but something, in order for it to be interesting, constantly needs to be changing, whether it's the cutoff filter opening up and stuff like that, right? Isn't that what you told me one time?
Yeah, definitely. So the idea is you want change happening the whole way through the track. And I suppose the more nuanced thing is, for different genres, you'll have different things changing and also kind of different amounts of change. So if you take, say, like a techno track being the one extreme, on the one hand, it kind of sounds like the same thing looped for 8 minutes, but there's still actually change happening every second or so the whole way through. It just tends to be a bit more subtle compared to, say, I don't know, like a dubstep track or a pop track, where you might literally have 8 bars and then a whole brand new thing for 8 bars and then a whole brand new thing again for another 8 bars. So kind of how you make that change depends on the genre and how you want to do it, but you kind of fundamentally want things changing from beginning to end.
So how do you go about that, John? How do you go about finding the nice little balance between variation and repetition? Because I kind of feel like that's the battle that all of us kind of struggle with. You know what I mean? Yeah.
So I like to have a theme that I use throughout this song. And it's funny because this song, it kind of started this little bell line here that I came up with. So that I actually started writing in a major key, and it sounded more like this. So with that, I was almost just messing around at that point. I wasn't really trying to like write anything to this song. I had that bell sound and I was kind of playing on the piano, and I was like, that hook would sound really good, or that line would sound really good over this part over here. So then I just took the top part. I didn't use the chord progression. I just took the top part and put it over my main chord progression, and it ended up sounding like this. So just gives it a completely different feel. And then I actually bring that back in again at the very end in that major, with the major conclusion. That way it almost sounds like hopeful at the end, you know, because like for the most part of the song, it sounds very, very dark, very, very kind of eerie. And then at the end, I kind of want to bring in this sort of major hopeful vibe to it, if that makes sense.
And how long would this track like this normally take from literally that initial vocal thing through to final master?
For me, honestly, it really depends on my level of inspiration. This song actually took, I think it was about a week to kind of like, you know, get all from start to finish, get the mixing, mastering done. But some songs, you know, like just depending on how much, you know, inspiration I feel like I'm getting at the time, they can take a lot longer, or they can, you know, take a lot quicker.
So how long did this end up taking?
It took me about a week from start to finish to get all the chord progression, melodies, mixing, mastering down to where I had like a final wave file that I could feel comfortable uploading.
I still think that's awesome. From the time that you started to the final master, it took a week. That's a pretty dang good time. I mean,
well, and honestly, like in terms of music that I normally write, this was it was fairly simple and straightforward. Like there's not a lot going on in this song. It's more about the emotion than it is like the complexity, if that makes sense. I feel like this song actually took a lot faster than most songs normally do. I would say most songs normally take me at least 2 or 3 weeks.
Gotcha. So question with that then, how does one, because I kind of feel like this is also the common battle with a musician, is that they don't know how to properly get their emotions out into the DAW. You know what I mean? Because it sounded like you did it relatively quick. I mean, we got some people trying to get, you know, a very emotional song out and it takes a year to do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
How did you get to a point where you're like, this really conveys what I'm feeling? You know, like I actually feel good about this. You know, did you preferred method or?
That's such a good question, because it's so hard to answer, you know, with one answer really. Because for me, I feel like I have an understanding of music where I can play what I'm feeling on the piano. Like I can kind of like, I can play any chord progression that kind of like portrays how I'm feeling at the time. And so a lot of times it really depends on how I'm feeling at the time, because this was a very emotionally driven song. At the time I was very emotionally charged. It was really easy for me to just sit down and kind of just play what came to mind and say, that's what I'm feeling. But it really, really depends. I would say it depends on the authenticity of it. You know, because a lot of artists try and create that emotional song for almost like the pop factor, if that makes sense. It's not really something that they're feeling. It's not really something that drives them. It's more just they're trying to make a catchy hook that speaks to the audience, if that makes sense. So I feel like it really just depends on you, really. It depends on how you're feeling. It depends on your level of inspiration. This was just, I don't know. It's just one of those lucky happenstances that I just sat down and it kind of just came to me.
That's interesting. So what you're saying is that, correct me if I'm wrong, but what you're saying is that basically what you did to really help get your emotions out onto the DAW, basically, you basically put your ego completely to the side and was just like, I don't care how many people are going to like this. I don't care who this is going to go to. All I care about right now is getting my emotions out. I'm not going to use samples that's popular right now. I'm not going to use techniques that's popular right now. I'm going to do things that feel good to me and that perfectly convey the emotion. And I kind of feel like by doing that at the end, it will create a giant, basically, ball of emotion that's compartmentalized with all these things, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I'm guilty of writing the song that I kind of want to cater to people. You know, I've written those songs. I've catered before, but this song literally has nothing to do with that. Honestly, I wasn't really expecting it to receive the feedback that I did. It actually ended up being my best received song. But it was just, honestly, it wasn't like I wasn't trying to write it to kind of cater to anyone's taste. I was just writing it because it was what kind of came to me.
Yeah. So, were there any points in this track that you found difficult? I suppose the factor came together in about a week or so to sign it flowed pretty well. But were there any bits, whether it was songwriting or finding the right samples, that was a bit more challenging?
Yeah. I wanted the drums to be very big and powerful, and that honestly is hard in itself to do. Also, I wanted to have a very like realistic, authentic feel for the drums. I would say coming up with this little drum riff right here was kind of hard, just because just trying to find the samples and stuff that actually like work. That little roll there is all, it's not like any sort of sample. It's all just different samples that I lined up to kind of like make that, if that makes sense. And then just like the processing the drums to make them sound really big and wide. That's generally a hard thing. And it's funny because like this kick right here that I use, I actually put a guitar distortion on it right here.
CLA, love that.
Yeah, just to give it that really kind of crunchy feel. Just I put a guitar distortion, and I used a couple other. This one as well. I really like this one. It's just basically an EQ from Waves, and I really like it.
So when you're looking for samples and you're trying to find the right one, do you kind of choose the sample knowing that you then may, what's better way of phrasing the question? So when you're choosing samples, do you kind of choose them expecting that you have to process them loads, or do you try and pretty much find the perfect sample, even if it takes, I don't know, like 40, 50 minutes or so to find that perfect sample?
I actually, honestly, I don't have as many sample packs as I would like. So I feel like I end up having to work with a lot of the ones that I do have. And honestly, it's probably just that I haven't really taken the time to sit down and go find a bunch of sample packs. But I have some ones that I really like Cashmere, his volume Sounds of Cashmere Volume 2. I love that sample pack. There's a lot of really high quality samples in there. But I think for this one, it was one that I had gotten from Somatics, and that's the original sample. That's what it sounds like. And then after processing it sounded more like this. So there's definitely a significant amount of processing that went into giving it that huge crunchy feel.
Just looking at your session here right now, so I'm not as familiar with FL as I probably should be. So do you do any group processing? Like, for example, did you group process all of your drums together?
No, generally I do every one on a separate bus. And honestly, a lot of that is I just haven't figured out in FL how to have an effects bus. Like I know how to route it to a different track, but I cannot for the life of me like figure out how to get it coming out of just, if that makes sense, like how to get it all coming out of just that one track instead of like duplicating the sound.
We are probably not the guys to ask.
That's okay. That's good.
No worries. And do you find that you ever, because it's a question I get asked at least once a week or so, like what DAW to get. So my answer's always been, you can make the best tracks in the world using any DAW, but I suppose objectively speaking, you probably wouldn't choose FL. So do you feel creatively held back by the DAW at all? Or?
No, I wouldn't say like creatively. I don't think there's any sort of like. I love FL. I think it's a really good DAW to start with, especially like for people who are just interested in getting it, because the workflow is so easy. The piano roll is just brilliant. It's a very, very easy workflow. It's more like the performance side of it that I would say FL is lacking, which is why I want to move to Ableton, just because eventually I want to be performing my music live with like keyboards and drums and stuff. And I just really couldn't do that with FL.
Oh, that's interesting. So you want to move to Ableton for more of the live aspect.
Correct. Yeah. Honestly, I'll probably just produce an FL until I die. But with Ableton, I want to have that live aspect for it.
Was there any new techniques that you tried in this that you hadn't tried before? Basically, like you're just like, you know what? I heard about this in a tutorial. I'm going to try this and see if it works out.
I would say like the vocal chops a little bit, because I haven't really done a lot with vocal chops before. This one, I wasn't really trying any techniques that I had seen online. I just kind of was messing around with it. So during the actual drop part, I have kind of these two layers. So I took part of this sample here, basically that right there, and then I repeated it. So it sounds like this. And then I took a section of it and I pitched it higher and I put it into a direct wave, which is Fruity's sampler basically. And then I kind of I layered that over the top of it right here. So it kind of gives it. So that was something I hadn't really tried before, and it ended up, I really, really liked it. I liked the way it sounded. So altogether, It's really subtle in the background. You can kind of barely even tell it's there, but it just gives it that little bit of an edge.
So how did you decide where to do the vocal chops? I've heard different techniques and everything, but how did you decide you're like, nope, that little part right there, that's the good. I'm gonna work with that.
Honestly, a lot of it is just experimenting and messing around with it. Like I took other sections of the little vocal sample that I had and messed around with it, but I didn't like any of them. That one was just, I don't know. It just kind of made sense to have that part repeat. Yeah. I guess that's really the best answer I have for you.
Oh, it's awesome. Do you still have the vocal processing on the main vocal?
This one, I kind of wanted it to sound like had a little bit of a distortion on it. Kind of like a voice box type. Mm-hmm. Oh, not a voice box. What's that like? Kind of like a vintage feel. I actually did a lot of processing on it, as you can see. Usually, so I have this one. It's basically just a stereo widener.
The one above that picture, is that just like auto tune basically?
Yeah, I just have like a kind of subtle auto tune on there just to make it sound a little smoother. By the way, Valhalla Shimmer is one of my absolute favorite plugins of all time. Yeah, then I had just an effects on there that give it a little bit of like distortion to make it sound a little bit more vintage. We could have been forever. Whereas without it, it would sound more. We could have been forever.
So yeah, because it just kind of depends on the type of sound you want. Do you want more of that raspy kind of older sound, or the more clear sound? Which in your case, the raspy, more vintage sound was the better option.
Yeah, and I don't really know why I went with that. Honestly, it just kind of worked. I just really liked the way it sounded. I wasn't really like, I didn't create the vocal pattern with the intention of giving it that sound. I found it and it worked, so kept it.
Yeah, that's awesome. So,
sorry, go for it.
Yeah, you go for it, dude.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So just a quick one. So when you're choosing stuff like reverbs, are you doing it consciously thinking about the stereo image and thinking about where things are sitting and where the reverb might sit around it, or are you going more on just kind of feel and how it kind of makes you feel, I suppose, emotionally when you are playing the track?
I generally the reverb that I choose is based a lot on like what it is, like where it's sitting in the track. So Shimmer, it's not even really so much a reverb as it is like an ambience. But usually I only use Shimmer on the high ends, like on leads, on high synths, plucky bells, stuff like that. And then if I want reverb on like a little bit more of a mid or like a vocal or anything like that, I'll use Valhalla Room, and I just have very, very light reverb on it to just give it kind of a little bit more of a wider feel. Yeah, that's basically the two reverbs that are my favorite.
Question for you. I think that's track 3 right there that I'm looking at. So in FL, can you have MIDI and audio on the same track?
Are you talking about in the mixer bus or what?
I think it's the one where your higher vocal chop is up on the arrangement. Yeah, because it says pattern 14.
Pattern 14. Oh, this one right here?
Yeah, so like, isn't that MIDI followed by audio?
Basically, it's just layered over it.
I've never seen that before. Multiplier. Explain the sign.
I probably should have heard of that before, but no, I've never seen that.
Yeah, it's just you can basically you can lay it on top of whatever. It'll still play like wherever it is.
That's strange.
I think I heard about this in Bitwig. I think where you can kind of do this, where you can have audio and MIDI on the same track. My Ableton mind is kind of boggled right now as to how that works, to be honest.
Yeah, my whole audio routing kind of brain is short circuiting a little bit.
Honestly, that's actually, it's funny that you say that, because that's one of the things that a lot of people don't like about FL Studio, is that it's so open to kind of do whatever you want. There's not really like a set process. Like you can basically, put audio and MIDI and, anything like automation clips. You could have them on anywhere basically, which can end up being kind of messy. And if you look at my workflow, it's very messy. I don't really color code or organize. It's just kind of a mess, which makes it harder for me if I have to go back later. But honestly, it's just because I'm kind of lazy about it.
No, that's cool, man.
Yeah, so I suppose also partly helping me, but also other people that are a bit more familiar with Ableton. So what I'm looking at here is this. So like everything from above the purple line, is that all your main elements, or is there kind of other elements further down, or?
It really just depends. So generally, when I bounce a track down, it'll automatically show up below everything here. It'll show up in the next available slot, if that makes sense. So like this right here, I think it just had like a little, but yeah, basically anything can go anywhere. And I just kind of organize it so that I have all the main elements kind of on the top, and then the automation usually is on the bottom, just because it makes it a little bit easier to make sense of.
I suppose also just in terms of your track count here, is this, I mean, what I like about it is you can kind of, because there's not in the case of Trivector like 300 different channels, you can literally just glance at the screen and work out what's playing at any given time. Is this a pretty normal track count for you? Because I personally like to, if possible, keep it low as well.
Honestly, yeah, this is on the low end. Yeah. Generally my tracks like honestly come down to like 20, 25. I have a lot of stuff generally going on in most of my songs. This one's pretty simple.
What's the highest track count that you've had?
Honestly, I don't even know. I generally, if it gets down into like where I have to start like expanding some, that's generally like way too many. So I would say like probably like, I don't know, 40.
So talking about different DAWs right now, what have you seen inside of Ableton so far that's super confusing as opposed to FL?
The first time I opened up Ableton to try and figure it out, I gave up in like 2 seconds because I couldn't figure out how to get to the playlist. Like I couldn't figure out how to get to this part. And it was funny because I was asking Brendan about it later, and he's like, "Oh, dude, you just hit tab." And I was like, "Oh, okay, that makes sense."
Oh, okay, so you were stuck in the session mode.
Yeah. Okay. And that was like honestly as much thought as I gave it. I was just like, I'm done. I'm using FL Studio. So now that I figured that out, I'm willing to give it another shot. I definitely need to move in the direction of Ableton.
No, that's totally cool. Here's my honest opinion about DAWs, right? I see them as I view DAWs as I view cars, right? Basically, does it matter if you have a Ford Fusion as opposed to a Chevy Cruze? Not really. You know what I mean? As long as you know how to drive your Ford Fusion and you know how to get from point A to point B and how to change the oil and how to back up and how to do like all that kind of stuff, like high five. Once you start getting into the nitty gritty of all that kind of stuff, then you see there starts to be bells and whistles with each one that's different from so-and-so to so-and-so. So for example, like in FL here, how you can put audio and MIDI on the same track, you can't do that in Ableton, all right?
Yeah.
Well, that's one bell and whistle that FL has. And then let's say, like a bell and whistle that Logic has is their vocal comping capabilities that, to my knowledge, no other DAW has. And so that's one of their bells and whistles. And then in Ableton, they have the session view, which depending on who you are and how you write your music and everything could be a bell and whistle or it could be a hindrance. Is that making sense? I mean, do you guys...
Yeah, absolutely.
So was there anything in this track you did that people might say is technically wrong, quote unquote, even though it worked in the context of the track?
I'm sure there is. A lot of times, I would say one of the biggest things that I do wrong is not using a dedicated effects bus. And right now, that's really just because I'm not even sure how to do that. But just because, like, if you have like reverb on a lot of tracks, it can sound muddy. And I feel like I've been able to figure out how to do it in a way where it doesn't. I've kind of like just understanding the way sound works and the way that kind of reverb works. I've just been able to figure out a way to do it where it doesn't sound muddy, such as only using like shimmer, like really huge reverbs on the very highest like leads and stuff like that, and then using like very very minimal reverbs on mids and stuff like that.
So the question that I have for you is the question that we always ask people when they come on the show. So it's basically, if you could go back in time and set with younger John when he was composing this song, would there be anything that you would tell younger John that would kind of help the process go easier, or is there anything you tell him to avoid or to try differently or anything like that?
Yes, because if you look right here, so this is my master track right here, and I have this. It's this native to FL plugin called Maximus, and it's like a
multi-band maximizer. Is that what it is?
Yeah, well, it's like just a master basically.
Whoa, what was that?
That's just like, it's just cool. The bands that's just like, if it's not playing anything, it kind of just does that for.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, basically it's more for mastering than it is for EQ. It has like compression. You can compress like mids and lows and stuff like that. Anyways, one thing that I used to do that I look back and I kick myself because it actually ended up messing up a lot of the original songs that I had. I used to create my songs with this on. Basically, I would create it with a mastering plugin on, just to kind of like, I don't know if it was just to kind of like speed up the process of, you know, not having to master it as much at the end, but it caused a lot of issues afterwards when I would go in and try and adjust levels and stuff like that. So that is something that I'm glad I've moved away from. I now use Ozone to master, and I generally bounce it down to a WAV file and then start a whole new project and master in that.
Gotcha. So just so that I understand, so the basically what you go back and tell yourself is that you would not produce the track with the mastering chain on. So it's not like limiting and doing all that kind of stuff. You would actually like leave that until later and just produce the song as it is, right?
Yeah, so right now I turn off everything. I turn off like the limiter and I turn off Maximus, and then I create everything and then go back and add that later. Because honestly, it really doesn't help with the levels or anything. I like being able to go back and kind of find my peak after I have like the loudest part of the song created. That way I can really like adjust the limiter and see where I'm at.
What's your thoughts on that, Multiplier? Do you feel like that's a wise thing?
Yeah, so the whole, I suppose people sometimes call it mixing through a limiter, or I suppose mixing through a limiter, people might say. The only way that I can personally wrap my head around doing it in a way that makes sense to me is if you could literally see the limiter at all times. So while you're literally producing your track and doing your sound design, doing your songwriting, if you could see at all times, even if it's just in your peripheral vision, like how the limiter's doing the limiting, then I could kind of consider it to be okay, because you can see if, say, the limiter's doing like 10 dB of limiting or just 2. But for me personally, I prefer to separate the task. But the kind of more nuanced thing is you have to, for genres like dubstep and stuff, where you do definitely want to slam it through a limiter, you have to kind of produce the track knowing that it's going to change in mastering. So it's kind of, I think it's probably more important that you just get good at doing it one way or the other and don't flip-flop. But I think if I was to teach anyone fresh, I would say don't mix through a limiter, but then definitely like do it knowing that you will flatten your track out, potentially at least, during mastering.
You guys ready to move into the next track? Really cool. Just to give you a little bit of extra PR, because that track is...
Yeah, let's do it.
Just a sweet talker with your arms folded. Think I'm just gonna cave into your little ways. Hold my cold shoulder, give me away. You're pulling out every word that I say. Wish our truth hits you, not coming with you. Please understand. Sweet talker.
Basically, a lot of the ways that I design my synths, so the exhaust is just white noise. That's all it is. So the way I design it, I usually have like a mid and I cut the highs, and then I fill the highs with the white noise, just to kind of give it that.
Supersaw?
What was that?
For your supersaw, or what are we talking about here?
Generally for supersaws, like this one.
Oh, cool, because that's the same thing that Trivector did that I've been meaning to kind of try myself. Yeah. Because it kind of makes sense logically when I think it through, because it's like a smoother top end, because all the harmonics get a bit too tight.
Exactly. That's kind of without it, and then if I put it all together, just very very lightly hear it in the top, which just kind of gives it that little bit of harmonic excitement up there. Yeah, and so that's when I designed my supersaws. I used to just actually use a plugin and use straight white noise, but Cashmere had an exhaust that it's the exact same thing.
Gotcha.
It's so much easier just to use a sample and just lay it on top of there. Yeah, so generally the way I design my super saws, and I usually have a mid section that I cut off the lows and the highs, so like this right here. And even this, so the AU5 bass that I use here, I cut off the lows and keep just the mids and the highs to give it that crunchy sound, but I don't use it for a bass. And then I fill the low end with the sub.
awesome.
And then just do the exact same thing on the top end with the white noise.
Gotcha. So last thing that we like to do before we wrap up our interviews, and you know this, but we like to ask you, would you like us to give you feedback on this song or on the Catalyst?
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Between the Catalyst and this song, which one would you like more?
This song.
Okay, that sounds good. I have 2 pieces of advice for you. One of them is a workflow and one of them is a sound design thing that I would like you to try. Number one is the sound design one. I saw obviously in this track and the one before, so you have Harmer with the AU5 preset that you. So something that he told me, what he does now, instead of using Harmer, because now of course he's on a Mac and he's in Ableton, what he uses now to get that certain like signature AU5 thing. I really hope he's okay with me saying this. He's pretty cool. If not, we'll take it out. But so what he told me, what he does now is he uses you ever heard of Isotope's Iris 2?
I've heard of it, yeah.
Cool. It's a very, very cool plugin. It's like basically, so you take you take a waveform, right? And you kind of drag that into Iris 2, and then it looks very similar to Photoshop. You can like go in and highlight certain parts of the waveform. And I don't understand the science behind it of how it works or anything, but it basically gives that similar sound to Harmer. And I would say arguably even a better sound. So if I were you, what I would do is I'd go download the free demo of Iris 2, maybe watch the tutorials how to use it, because the sounds that come out of that is incredible.
Yeah.
Absolutely amazing. So I highly encourage you to check that out, man.
I definitely will, yeah.
Perfect. And then the second piece of advice that I have for you is workflow. And I forgot to ask if you do this, but I also want to just tell our viewers about it because it's a really good piece of workflow and could potentially help you. Maybe you already do it. So basically, what I was taught at Icon, which absolutely changed my life with getting things done, is that you create basically a checklist of things that you need to do for a song, and you put it in a very methodical order. So like, for example, the first thing that it sounds like you did for the Catalyst, and maybe I'm assuming this for this one too, was you created a chord progression, right? So depending on the person, this needs to be very individualized. Some people like to start with sound design, some people like to start with chord progression, some people like to start with vocals, so on and so forth. You have to individualize it for yourself, but you basically say, okay, what all needs to go into the song? All right, I need a chord progression, I need a melody, I need to do some sound design, I need to pick some drum samples, I need to sequence those drum samples, I need to do so on and so forth. And basically, as you start to do that, you're never just sitting on the computer working on a song. You're always very using your time the best way you can. You look at your list and you're like, okay, I need to do a chord progression now. And so you're using your time to do that. And then, so by basically doing the hard lift or the heavy lifting like that, that makes the creativity part of you just so easy to come in and do. Does that make sense? Because no longer do you have to be waste the brain power thinking, do I need to do chord progressions? Do I need to do melodies today? Do I need to do drums? It's like, okay, list, okay, here we go. And you're back into the DAW and you're doing everything that you need to. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yeah. So I would say one of my biggest weaknesses is having kind of that structure, because I don't really I kind of just I just go in and I just kind of mess around and whatever happens, which can kind of be a problem because it's just not very organized ever. And so I definitely think that's a good idea. I'll definitely start trying that.
That's awesome. Yeah, and that is the biggest argument that I can think of with this is that I've heard quite a few people say that this method hinders their creation or hinders their creativity. To me, it enhances it because I'm not wasting the brain power trying to figure out what I need to do.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
Because with each song it has to have certain elements, and so you just write those certain elements out. And at night when my wife and my daughter go to sleep, I pull up my checklist on my Google spreadsheet and I'm like, hey, I need to work on this right now. And so I go and I do it and I get it done, and it really just basically it cuts out 20% of unneeded brain power that you would have used otherwise. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Just I suppose one cool idea that I've been not really researching but just really enjoying recently. So one of the older Major Lazer tracks called Get Free, one of my favorite songs ever. I found if you compare how I suppose it was Diplo and then maybe the other guy at the time, so kind of how he uses vocal chops in say Get Free, it feels like it's on a whole new level compared to how most people do it. So he's first of all got a great vocal such as you have here, and he's not just doing kind of vocal chops and kind of different pitches and stuff, but he's almost doing counterpoint melody, but not really with melodies, but more vocal chops. So if you kind of quite consciously listen to that Major Lazer track Get Free, and kind of like putting your producer hat on, analyze the track to see how the different vocal chops kind of start at the beginning quite simple and they get more and more advanced in this really sort of cool counterpoint way where you get all these different kind of harmonies and different tones popping out. So I suppose just advice to anyone using vocal chops, check out Get Free by Major Lazer and see if you can get inspired by that.
Hey DAW Nation, thank you so much for listening to this episode of Behind the DAW, episode 7.5 with Thrillogy, where we broke down the Catalyst. I really hope you enjoyed it. I really hope you learned those things about the difference between Ableton and FL, the unique tips and tricks with starting a song, songwriting, and learning about the proper balance between variation and repetition, along with a slew of other things that we talked about. So I hope you enjoyed that. Again, if you're interested in the Patreon or giving suggestions for artists to come on the show or private lessons or to download the stems to the song that we dissected today, there are links in the description for that. Go ahead and click on those. They'll all take you to the DAW bot. He'll get you set up with the proper things that you need. Again, if you really enjoyed this podcast, go ahead, like, comment, follow, subscribe, whatever is appropriate on the particular platform that you're listening on, whether it's iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud, Google Play, Deezer, YouTube, wherever you're listening. Let us know what we're doing right. Let us know what we're doing wrong. We want to make this the best podcast for you to continue on your producer journey. And finally, please check out the next episode of this. The next episode is with White Light. We're going to talk about a lot of good things. I don't want to give too much away. So go ahead and check out episode 8 of Behind the DAW with White Light. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Behind the DAW. And you know what? You have a good day. All right. We'll talk soon.